My perspective about Tak Bai is something that like wounded history. That is the ongoing conflict. We got several incidents about um, violence, the state violence, and it becomes the wounded history.
On October 25, 2004, Thai security forces suppressed a large protest by Muslims in the town of Tak Bai by rounding up 1,300 protesters, stacking them on top of each other face down in military trucks and transporting them to camps in Pattani province 5 hours away. 78 people had suffocated or were crushed to death, and several others were shot dead while protesting outside a police station for the release of detainees. Known across Thailand's troubled south as the Tak Bai massacre, the incident would become another symbol of state impunity against the country's Malay Muslims.
We got several incidents about violence, the state violence, and it becomes the wounded history.
The soldier or security unit never and ever get punished, especially on Tak Bai massacre.
Muslims make up Thailand's second largest religious group, and Malay Muslims make up to 85% of the local population in the deep south, Satun, Yala, Pattani and Narathiwat provinces neighbouring Malaysia. Their unique culture, language and identity has always been a source of friction with the Thai government and has also resulted in decades-long insurgencies fighting what they call Thai colonialism.
We talk about Muslims in the south and we think that Thainess is the problem. Okay, they got the Thai nationality card, but they speak in Malay language. Their identity and particular culture that do not belong to Thai culture.
A lot of people don't seem to understand that it's the Thai government policy of failed assimilation. And why is that? Being Malay and being Muslim is two sides of the same coin. So when the Thai try to change that identity, it affects the other. They became less Muslim.
And this happened in 1939, when Siam officially became Thailand based on the three pillars: nation, referring to the Thai nation, religion, meaning Buddhism, and the king, referring to the monarchy.
Armed insurgency came like 50 years after the border was drawn with British Malaya. They didn't question or they didn't really challenge Thai sovereignty or Siam sovereignty in 1909 when the border was drawn. But when that policy of assimilation came at the expense of their religious identity, that's when they pick up arms.
A major incident that provoked the crisis was the mysterious disappearance of a religious leader, Haji Sulong, in 1954. In 1947, Haji Sulong presented a petition demanding Malay Muslim autonomy and recognition of their local identity, as a result of the Thai government's assimilation campaign and brutal oppression of the Muslim minority. Haji Sulong's 7 demands were rejected by the cabinet, which was mainly concerned about the division of the land. He was accused of being a separatist, arrested and forced to abandon his public activism in 1948. After his release in 1952, he was ordered to report to a local police station, but one day he mysteriously disappeared, along with 3 of his followers, including his son, while en route to the police station. Their bodies were never found. Malay nationalists believe that Haji Sulong was drowned by Thai police.
They are never ever told me about the disappearing of my grandfather and my uncle. I just knew when I was 5 or 6 years old, when my family took me to the Songkla Lake and praying. So I wonder and asked my mom what happened with our family. So she told me that my grandfather dead body there, and when I grow up, I just find it by myself. So my family just have to deal with the Thai government, central government, every time until now.
Haji Sulong's death contributed to social and political tensions, and since then, various insurgent movements, the strongest of them being the BRN, have clashed with government troops, resulting in casualties on both sides.
It's an ethno-nationalist movement. This is a second wave of full armed conflict, actually. The first wave started in the 60s, early 60s, and ended around late 80s, early 90s. They sealed the border, put several districts under curfew, mobilized a huge number of troops.
Human Rights Watch says successive governments in Thailand have dismissed the root causes of the grievances of Malay Muslims, specifically a lack of accountability for the government's human rights abuses in the region, in response to the insurgency. Then there's the economic and political marginalization and measures such as putting Muslim students on watch lists.
Discrimination is not obvious, but it's in everyday life. My student, my young male student, when they ride motor bicycle past the checkpoint, they would be checked, would be asked, or even take their DNA.
Just about all the young men are there are suspect. There's checkpoints everywhere. It's well documented about the so-called harassment, DNA testing. This tension, this conflict is rooted in the Thai nation-state construct that doesn't really recognize or acknowledge or allow the Pattani Malay to embrace their own identity.
We are Thai citizens, but our race is Malay, Melayu.
Freedom of religion is not an issue. It's not a problem. It's about the narrative. Historical, cultural identity narrative is not being included in the state constructed narrative. Thai national heroes are not their heroes. They have their own history. The Malay have their own heroes, and usually it's the people who stood up against the Siamese. It's people like Haji Sulong, for example. That's not included in the Thai narrative. We could talk about expanding the narrative. Autonomy doesn't have to be about administrative reform. It could be about greater cultural space. It could be about, empowering the local community to chart their own destiny, about right to self-determination as a concept, as a principle. Thailand or Thai state still can maintain that sovereignty, but have reform in such a way that acknowledge or recognize the local narrative.